Welcome everyone to Awesome Truth, a wrestling book club. I'm your host, Steve Semino, and with me as always is my co-host, Walt Schwenk. Hey, Walter.
Hello, Steven. How's it going?
My friend, it is going very well. We are back on Awesome Truth, and today, Walt, we are going back into the documentary world, into the world of Peacock WWE documentaries. We'll talk about why they're still on Peacock, what is going on there. It's very weird. The wrestling streaming landscape is very fragmented, but this is I guess, a hot new Peacock streaming doc that just came out relatively recently and is a slightly big deal, at least in terms of Peacock things being a big deal. Of course, I'm talking about the Heartbreak Kid, becoming Shawn Michaels, while we're watching a documentary about your boy HBK.
I mean, it's definitely new. I don't know how hot it is with regards to Peacock, but subscribers. But for
It was
me,
on
it's
like the
definitely a
little
hot
front.
doc.
I feel like it was on the little front page thing, the home page of Peacock. So again, what does that mean? I don't know, but they were pushing it, and obviously they're pushing it to you and I guess, because we have a history of streaming wrestling on Peacock. So the normie
Yeah,
Peacock person, who knows what they're getting? I guess.
yeah. The algorithm for us is very targeted. I would assume.
But this is like a
Uh,
feature length documentary, meaning it's 90 minutes, so it's an ample watch, and it's all about Shawn Michaels, and we can talk about it all. But it certainly tries to combine, giving a relatively brief run through of his history and career with a look at what it's like, now that he's in charge of NXT, and so. You and I were talking before we officially started recording. That is something that certainly we've never discussed, and I knew nothing about was what HBK's job was now as Mr. NXT.
yeah. Admittedly, the latter half of the doc I found more interesting only because it was uncharted territory for me as a Shawn Michaels fan. Um, I didn't know when he joined NXT exactly. I knew he's a part of NXT now, but they really do dive into Shawn Michaels, the mentor, and Shawn Michaels, like, I guess, the executive producer of, like, showrunner of NXT at this point.
Yeah,
He's
I
effective.
think I
He's
think
the
he's
Triple
VP of
H.
something, right? He's VP of NXT, I guess.
Well, they have a few VPs, but like,
Matt Bloom is
yeah,
VP of something else too.
talent
Yeah, so
development and
yeah,
something. Or maybe VP. I'm not sure
who
what the
knows
actual title is,
what
but
this means?
he's very much. It seems like he's very much in charge of that whole operation, which is great because I don't watch NXT, but I like Shawn Michaels a lot. So who else
Yeah.
better than to do wrestling?
And I will say, like that, you and I think were when NXT was quote unquote, on fire, when they were signing all the indie guys and a lot of the Japanese guys, and really a lot of the people that are, like the post Shield era when they had Sammy and Owens and Nakamura and all those guys. Like that was obviously a great NXT era. That was Triple H's NXT, and then but since they called all those people up and NXT sort of evolved into what it is now, I haven't watched a second of it really. It just hasn't been something I've spent any time on. But it seems like I know a lot of people have since graduated. The next wave has come up to the main roster, and they all seem like very strong competitors. So I imagine HBK is doing something right. And the thing I find the most interesting about him being in charge is, there's like an adage that is not always true, but is often true, that the best players are not the best coaches. Like they have this drive, they have this expertise, they have this ability. But when it comes to explaining to someone else how to do it, usually it's not their strong suit. Like it's like they are excellent at what they do, but they're not able to train and coach up the other people to do the same. It's just sort of innate within them. And then you see Triple H and Shawn Michaels, and obviously H's tenure, I think, on the main roster now is a little more iffy, like on just, but in terms of both their skill sets with NXT, with actually training a new generation, the next generation of wrestlers, it seems like it's something they're both pretty damn good at, which is just not something I would have expected 10, 15, 20 years ago to hear that this is a strong suit for either of them.
Yeah, I think that they made a interesting delineation because I forgot about NXT 2.0 and the black and the gold versus the new wave, and they made a point to bring up that at some point the whole developmental system the philosophy behind it and the methodology of bringing talent in completely shifted from indie stars, what you were saying, which was Triple H's kind of game, to just badass athletes that could be molded into wrestlers. And I thought it was interesting they brought that up and they made a point to kind of harp on that fact because Shawn Michaels was at the time an incredible athlete, and then with his mindset of being the best wrestler, in my opinion, the best wrestler of all time, that's the kind of person you want to train an ex-athlete that has maybe 3 months of training behind him because he can actually speak to that person in his way and mold that person in the way that he became in a way that nobody else really could do really. And so I feel like and that's also a big like discernible difference between Triple H's NXT and this now Shawn Michaels NXT is that fact is, you really are developing athletes into wrestlers, not just like taking an indie star and just making sure they know where the hard cam is. Like those are two very different developments for
Yep.
humans trying to fake fight.
No, it's very true. And it does sort of delineate, yeah, like H maybe was, and this could sort of maybe explain why his main roster run has been so mixed and why, they're sort of stagnating right now. H seems like he was a really good talent scout, and maybe there wasn't a lot of skill to find the best indie guys and give them jobs and let them cook.
Give them money.
Yeah, give them money and jobs and let them be on TV and do the thing they already did really well. But he still picked out, the transition. That wasn't always a guarantee that someone would come to WWE at any level and figure it out, how to do the WWE thing. And so H obviously did a great job in getting people situated for that. Whereas, like you're saying, Michael seems like he's done an excellent job at something that he talks about in the documentary too. He gives a little pep talk to the crew, and he says, I think it's like 6 months. Is that right? Maybe is that the amount of time? He says
6 months.
He's like 6 months into this job, I was peeing my pants, especially if I was on like TV working in front of 1,000 people or whatever, and they're all, and the NXT crew is doing that, like clockwork. That's just what you got to do. And so he heaps a lot of praise on them, and I think that is a very true point. And the business has obviously changed a lot in 40 years from when he started doing this, but it is crazy to lay it out that way, to be like, you need to be like, they'll obviously give you time and resources to a certain extent, but at the end of the day, they're putting on, television program. Like you're training to be on TV, and they want you on TV as soon as possible and to be a functioning member of that roster. And so the way these men and women need to turn it around so quickly is pretty wild. And the fact that Michaels gets so many of them ready to go that quickly, and they learn on the job, but still, don't embarrass themselves in the process, that is something really impressive.
Yeah, I was thinking about this while watching those sections because I did find this doc. So just to take a step back for a second, I think half the doc is retreaded space. I could have written quicker than ChatGPT.
We should say half of it's interwoven. It's like modern stuff and flashbacks. But yeah, half of it is literally the history of Shawn Michaels. You could see in any other documentary, although well done, I suppose. And then half of it, like you said, is the NXT stuff going on right now.
And so I found the NXT stuff endlessly fascinating. Maybe it stayed its welcome a little too long because by the end of it, it was like, okay, we get it. Shawn Michaels is lauded as like this great mentor and this person who cares about everybody and is just this huge like key piece to WWE's future through the developmental and the NXT. So but for the most part, it's the side of Shawn Michaels I've never seen in the ways that people probably watch Unreal to see a side of Triple H you haven't seen, which is like the creative side of this guy running the show. And I was thinking about just the idea of if I was to run this kind of organization, who would I want doing it? I'm like the two guys who created DX and were staples. I would probably put very high on that list of people who I'd want to shepherd the next wave of the future talent of wrestling. Like, I feel like there's not many other people I would put on that list. Maybe like a Hall and Nash, but you could also make the argument against it. Like,
One of them's
there's
dead
not,
too, so that makes it tough.
well, and hypothetically speaking, I
Yeah, of
should say,
course.
not literally. But but I just like I started to think about who else would even qualify as in that, and I was really struggling because like who I wouldn't put on that list necessarily from watch as a fan of wrestling watching this guy is Matt Bloom, but he's on that he's very much involved too. But like Shawn Michaels and Triple H, I would definitely put on that list for the
Hmm.
reasons like that were reminded through the stock of Shawn Michaels' past performances and just like how influential they were throughout the 90s and 2000s.
Yeah, and like and this is something that they say in this one, and we've seen it in a million docs and books, etc. Like these guys ate, breathed, and dreamt about wrestling. They just wanted all they did was talk about wrestling, wanted to be the best wrestlers. And to a certain extent, it's that's so that's a trite thing that we hear so much because it's like it's part of the overall stupid Kliq story, which is just so frustrating to me to hear at this point because you think that no other wrestlers were ever friends before. Do you know these wrestlers were friends and they talked about wrestling and they were good? It's like, yeah, I bet everybody has fucking friends. That's how it works. Like the Shield traveled together. They all fucking travel together. Like, we just don't. It's just not built. It doesn't have the level of mythos, the myth building bullshit that the Kliq stuff does. Like I'm just like it's just very exhausting to me. But your point is well taken that these are two guys, especially H has been, I think even back in the day was never shy about making it clear that he wanted to like run things to a certain extent, whether it was his own booking or the booking of everybody. That was sort of an H thing. The Michaels thing is more fascinating because he did, like I was saying at the top, he did always seem to me like the kind of guy who had this natural skill and maybe was not able to tell other people how to do that. Like because you watch the doc and you see some clips of old Michaels, which is always fun for me to watch because like he was just when he was really young and he just was getting started out, he was this doughy, short-haired guy. Like he was so unimpressive looking, and to see that in like 83, 84 or whatever, and then to see in 92, less than a decade later, he's slim as hell, he's got a hairy chest, he's got the long hair, he looks outrageous. Like you're like, this guy just like molded himself into this like freak of nature superstar who was charismatic as hell. And like it's just like I didn't know that was necessarily something he'd be able to put into words to somebody else. So the fact that now he does this for a living at a high level, it's just not it's not something. Even though he was so good at his own career, I didn't always see it. When I was younger, I was like, oh, Shawn Michaels is going to be in charge someday. That just seemed like a foreign concept.
Yeah, well, I think in the doc that he expresses it best, where he's like, "Yeah, I want to be able to help, but I don't want the responsibility of having a job." I'm like, "Dude, get in line." I feel the same way. I don't. How do I just get like a lot of money and just consult and not have to actually be
Not
responsible?
to show up every single day for 8, 9, 10 hours.
Yeah, I mean, I want that gig. I want that as well. So but that I mean, there's a huge but there's a difference between being a coach or being a mentor or being a running a class once a week at the performance center and then running the goddamn production and being the showrunner of this cable show. Like those are vastly different jobs. And so I understand him not wanting to do that, but I think once you kind of get embedded into molding the talent, coming up with ideas, coming up with matches, coming up with storylines, at some point you just blink and you're like, yeah, I might as well just run the tell the
Yeah.
cameraman where they should go to because that's part of what I want for this whole process. It's like, but
And he obviously is a hyper competitive guy, and probably realized that he's the best at it and the best suited for it. And obviously, H quietly or not so quietly wanted him to do it anyway. So yeah, I imagine, like you said, it probably was that sort of thing where, like, I think you might even say this in the doc that yeah, you just gradually you just become, oh, this is my show now. So why not crystallize it? Why not make it more real and more tangible?
right, and they do a good job. That's a good job, but they made a point to talk about the time where Triple H was hospitalized, and they didn't have a choice. He had to run the show because there wasn't a Triple H there to do it for him or to guide him. So, and that was interesting too. I thought there's so much about NXT that I know, but there's even much more of it that I don't know or don't remember. And it's gone, even in its short history, it's gone through a lot of different changes and iterations and regime changes. And it's on the network, it's on USA. There's pay-per-views, there's major live events. Apparently, there was a TNA cross-promotional pay-per-view or event,
Sure.
and so it's a this isn't nothing. This isn't like FCW where it was developmental because you were wrestling in front of 20 people in Tallahassee. It's like
Yeah.
this is a major investment that this guy is now in charge of. So
Yeah.
can't.
And like you said, the documentary is at its best when it's showing us that stuff. And my biggest issue with this documentary is going back to like the actual form of it and the template it uses. It I sort of wish it had just been, okay, we're telling the Shawn Michaels story, which means we'll speed run through every the history, the Rockers, Kliq, Screwjob, comeback, etc. And then we'll, end on the stuff that's new. But instead, it does, a little. It opens with a little bit of NXT, each like sort of chunk gives you a little NXT, and then go back to some history. The history is told linearly, but in those chunks. So you get the history, and then you get basically a commercial break. Even though it's on Peacock, so there's no commercial breaks. I guess there are for some people, but if you have Super Peacock, you're just going right to the next thing, and then you're getting the NXT, and then you're getting the history. I would have rather been totally from start to finish, and ended with a lot of NXT. But I guess that instead, for whatever reason, they felt like it was better to, or quote unquote, more interesting to do it in this sort of capacity.
Yeah, it felt like a really weird old school TV decision, the way it was programmed. But nobody's watching this on TV. Like maybe they'll be repurposed on USA or one of the
Yeah, perhaps they had
Comcast.
that would make more sense if they were to tell me, "Oh, we're gonna syndicate this," which I don't know where they would do that. But if that was somehow the plan, it would make more sense, and I'd be less judgmental about it. So
But it's a Peacock premiere, so
yeah,
I mean, I hear what you're saying, and the flashback to flash forward to flashback to flash forward did kind of get exhausting. So you could either just start with modern day Sean, take us back to the origins, and then eventually work your way back up to latter day Sean again. That's how most docs kind of set up the narrative
hmm
is where are we now, and let's take you back to where we started. But it did feel like we kind of went back and forth. We ping ponged a lot from present to past, and we didn't really need to do that. I'm like, I'm here. I'm watching this thing on Peacock. Like, I'm not channel surfing at this point.
and then I see
I'm
the
not. I'm
NXT
not switching to
segments.
Bravo. Yeah.
No, of course not. Why would you do that? But the NXT segments didn't even necessarily relate to the WWE segments that followed, too, or the history segments that followed. So, yeah, I don't totally get that format exactly. What I will give them credit for, though, and if we do have to do the history thing, which is a ton of things we already know, it's the Kliq, it's the screw job, it's a lot of things that have been told to death. As far as I can tell, those were all new interviews with everyone involved, So that's what I do appreciate. And there was some backstage stuff you can tell they did not just fart out the history stuff, like they have so much stuff they could have just reused things over and over again. But as far as I can tell, they got Brett, they got Nash, they got Flair. Like those all look to me like they were fresh interviews, and they also did it in reasonable chunks too. Like they didn't spend too much time on things like the Kliq and the screw job that we've heard so many times. Like you have to include it, I guess, if you're going to tell the history of Shawn Michaels. But I feel like they did go through it pretty quickly. And then obviously they had a lot of Shawn from now talking about how depressed he was, how fucked up he was on pills. Like I feel like there was a lot of transparency and honesty there, which Shawn has been very good at for 20 years now at owning up to his bullshit. And I feel like they did do a good job of peppering in enough commentary and enough insightful stuff that it didn't just feel like rehash, same old, same old.
Yeah, and they definitely hit upon a few things that I had forgotten about, or what I found interesting. It's like those that B-roll or the stock footage of Shawn Michaels as a local news anchor or sports reporter, or
Yeah.
him in the hunting or the outdoor channel with his like hunting show. And I remember at the end of the doc they talked about uh, him doing TikTok trends with the talent and just show, I guess, juxtaposing his like the fact that he's not in touch with trends or anything, but he's still like respected with these young people and helping them succeed, or I guess that was the point in that. And then juxtaposing that with the video of him on AOL from the
Yes.
90s.
Poking with one finger on each key.
Yeah. And I'm like, man, they're really going to
And
milk.
Vince dunks on him from commentary too.
Yeah. Like, wow, they really are milking that archival footage. I've seen that archival footage a lot, but this is the perfect moment to show.
Yeah.
They did a lot of cool, they did show a lot of interesting, like, archival things that I wouldn't have, I haven't seen a lot of, or I haven't seen any of it.
Yeah, and I feel like they in touching on the Triple H, Michaels connection and how they both have these jobs now. I feel like Shawn, this is the most detailed I've seen Shawn be in a straightforward way about how, his commitment to H as a friend and as a
Hmm.
partner and just all these things. Like he makes it pretty clear, like I was stoned out of my mind on pills almost all day, but then Hunter was there to sort of like get me functional so I could show up to work and not die honestly at certain points. So like I
Yeah.
feel like it just I was like, oh, like because I think Hunter even says too, it's like why would you hang out with this guy? He was a pillhead, he was an addict. Like why are you spending time with him? And like Hunter tries to make it clear like he was so good and he was so magnetic and he was so talented and like he was my friend and like I was trying to get him through, like I feel like there's just they obviously I knew that sort of innately, or they've talked about it before, probably in Michael's book that we did 5 years ago. But
Yeah.
I feel like they did a really good. I feel like they did a good job of like illustrating that in the context of what they both do now. And I was like, oh, like I see how this strong this bond is between them, and I see how important Hunter was as the sober one, or relatively sober, certainly by comparison, and like the sort of the rock that helped these guys get through the problems they had, specifically Shawn.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you'd want with your longtime friends is to get them jobs and you work together and
That's
do
it.
cool things. It's like, yeah, so there's to some extent, it's like that's exactly what we all strive for to some degree.
It's just H
Uh,
always seems like, I think it's easy to sort of say like Shawn was the workhorse, Shawn was the legend, and H became a legend in his own right, but certainly was a coattail rider for 3, 4, 5 years or so, and then was also to some extent a right place, right time kind of guy, but I think it just really shows that like Shawn relied on H more than I think I realized, like Shawn needed H there. It wasn't like H was just sucking up to the champion. Like it does seem like it was a very give and take sort of thing, and they both had, they both really needed each other in their own way.
yeah, it's also just fun just seeing diff. You know, the Shawn Michaels story has always been the the ascent, the ascension and asshole, and then the end of his career, and then the second half of his career, like the Renaissance. And everyone's like, well, he's a dick, but he's a nice person. You're seeing those same few performers say that over and over, like Brett saying that, Taker saying that, Steve Austin saying that, and just hearing that from the same like several talking heads. But seeing people who weren't exposed to the Attitude Era, probably weren't born during the Attitude Era, talking about these guys with such like admiration still, but also just respect and love to a certain extent. It's like it was refreshing to see that, like hearing Drew Mack
Hmm.
talk about like, oh man, I love this guy, or Javon Evans. Is it Javon Evans?
I believe so.
Okay, or Trick Williams, and those guys talking about how much they like this guy. It was just different for once, and not seeing, just not hearing people like tell me that this guy was a dick and that he wasn't because he found God. It's like this has nothing to do with his religious, um, finding Jesus like redemption arc from 20 years ago at this point. This is like a whole new generation of people who think this guy is great for different reasons. And I thought that was also refreshing just to
Yeah. And
watch.
Michaels has always been good. And obviously, there's times when they did front load it. Like I know there was literally one moment where he was tag teaming with God, right, against Vince and
I
Shane. Is
sure
that
remember
correct?
that. Yeah.
So, and it's not like they've been. It's not like they've always kept the God thing, on the back burner or his religious beliefs. But he it clearly got him to where he is right now as a functional, happy human being. Got him out of some really dark places. But I feel like he does not bring it to the front of every conversation. He does not spout off. He does not preaching two people, it works for him, and like I think he just does it. He's just a very, as a non-religious person myself, I always appreciate when I hear him talk or write. Like he's just not the kind of person who's overbearing about it. Like he clearly is like, I was going to die if I kept living that way, and I found God, and now I am happy, and like this works for me. And I just appreciate that about him, that he seems very at peace with what his conversion and his lifestyle has brought him now, and but he doesn't feel like he's trying to make you understand or be too much about it. Like he just says it very matter of factly, and I just think that is just a very nice thing. Like people who are religious, good for them. I'm so happy it works for them. Like I don't necessarily need to hear about it all the time, and I appreciate that he's just even though he is a very famous convert in that sense, he does not feel like he feels like he needs to preach for the sake of preaching.
Yeah, and I mean, again, that's another reason why I'm tired of that story now. Like
Yes.
I'm
So
tired of the
I.
Attitude Era stories, but it also became a point where I'm tired of hearing about him being saved and being a nicer human as a result and stuff. Because I'd heard that story 100 times. But so yeah, so again, very refreshing just to it doesn't seem like religion is I mean, yeah, he might be nicer as a result or more forgiving or less of an asshole, but he's also just like just being a good person independent from him going to church
Yes.
and shepherding people and having this new responsibility and and this impact on people in a positive way. It's again, it's independent, it's mutually exclusive. It feels like we're not no one's tying it back to that story again because frankly at this point it has nothing to do with the one
Yeah.
doesn't have to do the other.
He found inner peace, it seems like, and then that has allowed him to unlock a nicer version of himself. It's just like
Yeah.
he's at peace, and so now he's just a normal guy. And in doing that, he just seems like a very pleasant man who everyone likes hanging out with. Like it's just
and,
and just a good coach and a good mentor, and that's great. Like that's really all it has to be. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. And
and
also, oh, good.
we got to see Shawn Michaels the father for the first
Yes, that's
time.
true. And his nepo babies who
I
have
just yeah.
jobs at NXT now. But he makes a good point, which is true, I think,
Yeah.
of Nepo babies, which is especially in a place as tight knit as WWE, if he gets his kids jobs, they're going to hold him to a very high standard because they're Shawn Michaels' kids. Like they will get in the front door a lot easier than most people, but if they screw up, they're going to feel pressure on themselves. There's going to be a lot of eyeballs on them. Everyone's going to know they're Nepo babies. Like, so I do think that is a fair point that they need to perform now once they get these jobs. So but also I will say they probably wouldn't have gotten jobs without their dad. But I
Probably not.
appreciate they seem to really appreciate it and try hard. And they both seem like very nice people too. So
It's funny how we never see Rebecca as his wife, I
yeah,
believe.
she's not in this.
Nitro.
Just some footage, right? Or she's not in it for a second.
I don't think she's ever been on camera talking about this guy's life before. I had
Yeah,
never seen it, or I can't remember it. But
which is crazy because there's been so many documentaries that he's either featured in or just involved in that could have had her saying something perfunctory or boring or whatever. But no, she just chooses not to participate, which good for her.
yeah, I mean, there was a story that they alluded to it a little bit where Sean is on pills and in front of his son, and the son is saying he's tired, and it's like there's a whole element to that in his book where his wife is like gonna leave him, and he's like, what am I doing here, and I guess praying through it all, but she's a pretty important character in all of this redemption arc. So the fact that we've never heard from her before and that I can remember in recent history, it's interesting that she's
Yeah,
just like barely a factor.
maybe she's like, well, I'll let Sean tell Sean's story. I don't need
Yeah.
to show up and chime in and say, yeah, that's all true. That's what happened.
I'm just a Nitro girl here. I don't I
Yeah,
don't cut
I just
promos.
I just married some guy I was in love with, and it turned out that he was a pillhead wrestling legend. Like,
Yeah.
didn't really sign up for the other stuff. I just wanted to be in love with this guy.
Yeah.
I will say too, I love that Sean is just balding in the weird in like the most does not give a shit way possible. Like his hair is so insane for someone who had like really cool wrestling hair, like top end wrestling hair for his entire career. The fact that now he's been obviously in the last like 10 years, we get a lot of footage of modern Sean. He's balding aggressively. He's 60 years old. I love that he doesn't give a shit, but it's just he clearly does no work on his head whatsoever. Like it's just all deteriorating. And he's like, whatever, I'm Shawn Michaels. I'm just gonna let it go. Whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, well, the cowboy hat's really
Yes, that's true. That's the one caveat. He does wear a cowboy hat a lot. But when he's doing training stuff, when he's doing the talking heads, we always get a cowboy hat. When we see a lot of, sort of in ring stuff here, and you see that bald noggin, and you're like, wow, Sean's just out there doing his thing. He doesn't even have the ponytail anymore. He just sort of has wispy locks in the back, and then it's all just going on the front.
just another 60-year-old bald
Yeah,
man, you know.
honestly, as a man who's balding at 40 right now, I respect that because I'm like, you know what? Like, you could probably clean it up a little more, but if I was as cool as he was and I had nothing to prove to anybody ever, I like to think I would care even less, And I'd like, what are you gonna do? Like, I'm Shawn Michaels. Like, there's a lot of footage of me with really cool hair, and now I'm old and I don't have it anymore, and it just is the way it is.
And guess what? People still like me because I'm making them fucking millions of dollars of
I'm a
being
cool
superstars.
trainer guy now, so
So they forgive my lack of hair.
that's it. Well, any other thoughts on this? I think it's a very solid watch. I just a little too long, perhaps. Doesn't need to be
Yeah.
90, but like you said, there's a lot of stuff here that it was very fun to see.
It overstayed its welcome at times, but ultimately it was nice new footage of this guy. Interesting to see the NXT version, and yeah, I enjoyed the time I had reliving my favorite wrestler's life.
I also think it's funny that they talk about Flair and Taker as his final series of Mania matches, and then the doc implies that Shawn lost to Taker and never had another match. It's like
Yeah.
there might have been one more in there that we're not talking about. I don't know. It's not in the documentary, so I guess it never happened. But I have a recollection of perhaps another match in somewhere around the
Well,
world.
as we discussed, I think this is offline, but they also neglected to talk about his match with Vince McMahon. So
Yes, that's true. They can't help but have some Vince footage here and there and say his name, but yeah, some selective editing for sure. All of it understandable to a certain extent, but just as people who actually know the entire story, it just makes me laugh. The things that do not get a second of discussion. But
oh, they talked about how there were quote unquote company shakeups at one point during Shawn Michaels NXT run. I'm like,
yeah,
I wonder what that could be alluding to.
don't worry. Google it. Don't worry. That's not no time for it here. We got 45 minutes of NXT footage to show instead. But yeah, good watch. We'll see what happens with all these streaming things. Like, I don't quite know why this lives on Peacock, but everything else lives on Netflix. But pay-per-views live on ESPN. It's a weird time to watch wrestling on the internet. But I'm happy these things come out for our purposes. We need content to discuss. And it's I have Peacock through various credit cards that get me free months of things. So I guess I'm fine. That gives me a reason to actually have Peacock. But it is weird how this all works now. And I would wish it was nice. Remember back in the old days, they just had the network and wrestling was on it. You gave them $10 and you got wrestling. Like, I appreciated the openness of that transaction.
Simplicity.
Yeah, it was very simple. I give you
Yeah.
$10 and I get wrestling content, and we can just. And when I'm done with wrestling content, I just cancel it, and that's the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the number one question I get or I hear from wrestling fans is, "How do I watch this thing?" I'm like, I
Oh
have no
yeah,
fucking idea.
yeah. Don't is probably the best answer.
Fair.
Well, it's a decent watch. So if you have Peacock, give it a watch, and I think you will be mildly to medium entertained, which is about all you can ask.
It's a fair assessment.
If you want to hear us talk more about Shawn Michaels in the past many, many episodes about HBK, you can find our archives, awesometruth.libsyn.com. If you want episodes old or new, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts are delivered. We are there. Well, nice to talk about Mr. WrestleMania. That was sort of the hook, too, is Mania's over, but they made a documentary about Mr. WrestleMania. So hooray, we got one final episode of semi-real WrestleMania coverage.
Well, if our next watch along is a Shawn Michaels one, then we
Oh,
might be revisiting WrestleManias again. Who
honestly,
knows?
it probably should be. Let's see if we can find a Shawn Michaels match that we haven't really talked about that stands out.
There's plenty of them.
I know. I can't think of a good one, but I'm sure we'll put our heads together and we'll pick something great. Keep an ear out for that, everybody. Thank you all so much for listening, and remember, the truth will set you free.